Good morning and good evening in whichever part of the world you're watching this. On behalf of the International Budget Partnership and the Indonesian Finance Ministry, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this special conversation on promoting equity and accountability in the global COVID-19 response. I am delighted to moderate this thought-provoking dialogue with IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, Indonesian Finance Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati, US Comptroller General Jean Dodaro, and IBP Executive Director Warren Krafchick. My name is Beena Palikal, and I'm the General Secretary of the Economic and Educational Rights Wing within the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, one of the largest organizations in the country working for the last 20 years and advocating to end caste-based discrimination against the Dalit community, one of the oppressed and marginalized communities in India and Indonesia. We have found great value in our decades-long partnership and collaboration with the International Budget Partnership because we know ultimately budgets reflect what and whom a society values. Through this partnership, we've been able to demystify the budget process for Dalit communities who otherwise were excluded from these processes so that they can claim their rights to resources within the country. We will be showing you a video where the IBP partners with civic movements like ours around the world who built their budget literacy so that they can hold their governments accountable. In this way, movements can demand that budgets reflect the needs of ordinary people, nor special interests, nor those with privilege. I know Minister Indrawati is also a long-standing IBP ally, and in many ways, our relationships represent what is needed now the most, government and civil society coming together. As Ms. Georgieva said last week on Twitter, civil society has an important role to play in keeping governments on their toes and especially in ensuring accountability during the COVID-19 response. That is why we must continue to seek avenues to build diverse stakeholders together, and especially civil society and government, to ensure that budgets during this emergency and beyond are informed and reach those who need it the most. Let me turn your attention to the video highlighting these partnerships in action. After the video, we will turn to our panelists and discuss these issues, followed by a Q&A session with our audience. If you have questions for our panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat box or tweet using the hashtag #OpenBudgets. Let's now move over to watching the video. Thanks for joining us.
Most people in South Africa stay in informal settlements. A lot of these informal settlements lack enough water, they lack access to decent sanitation. COVID-19 pandemic and the economic hardships heightened the risk to catch the virus.
With the advent of the pandemic, we have witnessed some very measures related to the prevention of disease and have had some negative impact on persons with disabilities. The Senegalese Federation of Persons with Disability has set a series of action to monitor the program set by the government.
We smallholder farmers in Nigeria, especially women, have been marginalized over the past years. This is why for the past 6 months we have been doing a lot of campaign and doing a lot of documentation on the impact of the lockdown on women farmers.
We realize that collaboration between civil society and government ensured that resources and funds by government were not wasted or misused. And that during COVID-19, we could lessen the impact to the most vulnerable in the community.
Thank you once again for joining us. I hope our video gave you a sense of the resilience and power of civil society groups that are working around the world to ensure an effective COVID-19 response. I would like to turn to our panelists to reflect on the challenges and opportunities they see moving forward. Each of our panelists is a critical stakeholder in what we call the all hands on deck approach of donors, governments, auditors, and civil society working together to ensure equity and accountability in the COVID-19 response and recovery. We have with us Sri Mulyani Indrawati, who is Indonesia's finance minister and our co-host for today's event. From 2010 to 2016, she served as the managing director and chief operating officer of the World Bank Group. She also served as Indonesia's finance minister from 2005 to 2010, during which she was known for her commitment to reform and for steering Southeast Asia's largest economy through the 2007-2010 financial crisis. She has regularly been named to Forbes magazine's 100 Most Powerful Women's list, and in 2018, she has received the prestigious Best Minister Award at the World Government Summit. Next, we have with us Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, who has been a champion for engaging civil society and empowering women during her tenure as Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund and previously as the CEO of the World Bank. She's also no stranger to ensuring effective leadership in crisis management. As European Commission Vice President for Budget and Human Resources, she oversaw the EU's response to the euro area debt crisis and the 2015 refugee crisis. And as Commissioner for International Cooperation and Humanitarian Aid and Crisis Response, she managed one of the world's largest humanitarian aid budgets. In 2010, she was named European of the Year and Commissioner of the Year by European Voice. Next, we have Mr. Jean L. Dodaro, has served as the 8th Senate confirmed Controller General of the United States and the head of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO, since 2010. In more than 45 years at the GAO, Mr. Dodaro has held many executive roles, including Chief Operating Officer. He has helped lead major reform initiatives with Congress, including the Digital Accountability and Transparency Act of 2014, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act of 2014, the Fraud Reduction and Data Analytics Act of 2015, and the 1994 Government Management Reform Act. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Warren Krafchick, who is the International Budget Partnerships Executive Director. For 20 years, Warren has led and expanded IBP's work to train, partner, and promote peer learning with civil society groups in more than 120 countries throughout Africa, Latin America, and Asia to bolster government accountability. Warren is a co-founder and steering committee member of the global initiative Fiscal Transparency, and he was a founding co-chair of the Open Government Partnership. He joined the IBP after 9 years at the Institute for Democracy in South Africa, where he founded the Budget Information Service. It is my absolute pleasure to have this great panel with us. Let's get straight into the questions, into the discussion. And I'm sure all of you are waiting for this. The IMF has widely publicized its support to governments to combat the debilitating health and economic benefits of COVID-19 and the crisis, and has told governments, and I quote here, do whatever it is, do whatever it takes, but keep your receipts. Embedded in this advice are assumptions around the importance of accountability in the use of monies by governments. My first question would be to Ms. Gergieva. What does the IMF recommend countries to do with their receipts? And how will reporting and documenting lead to accountability?
Let me first say how grateful I am to all of you for assembling to have a discussion on accountability. In this crisis, so much is being done so fast that, of course, there is risk we may lose sight where money is going and how well it is serving, especially those most vulnerable. So let me answer your question by first saying what we should not do with the receipts. We shouldn't stack them in a drawer or store them in some unanimous space up in the cloud. We must use them, and use them means, one, be able to track where money is going, two, be able to bring citizens oversight of how money is used, and three, audit these receipts. So a couple of words on each one of them. Tracing the COVID-19 spending means that it cannot be spread all over the budget without ability to see what exactly is being done to massively increase financing for emergency needs. And that requires putting a special allocation visibly in the budget. And it requires also financial management information systems that allow us to see in real time where money goes. The good news is that many countries have embraced tracking and monitoring very actively. Of course, Indonesia is a great example, but I will leave Sri Mulyani to talk about the Indonesian experience. We have seen countries like Honduras, Guatemala, Rwanda making great use of financial management information systems, or Colombia creating a very clear space for COVID-related spending in budget. Secondly, very important that citizens can follow the money. And that means open access to granular data. When people are able to see where money is going, this is the best control one can have. And in that regard, we particularly emphasize procurement contracts. Make sure that we know who wins them on the basis of what criteria, who is the owner of the company, so we can be sure that there is no either perceived or real risk of corruption. And last but not least, audit the receipts. And we have Adil on our panel is going to talk about how the US is doing it. And from what I saw, it is bi-monthly, 2 times a month you audit. And we have seen very good examples in this regard in many countries. For example, Sierra Leone learned from the Ebola crisis how to do these audits fast and effective, and they're going for it. In Liberia, the Internal Audit Agency actually identified problems early, so these problems can be solved. And I want to shout out the praise to New Zealand. They established a new parliamentarian committee, epidemic response committee, specifically for this purpose, to provide oversight. And finally, what do we do at the IMF? One, we push for these measures, and especially when we provide financing, we include them in our financial packages. Two, we provide capacity development to countries, especially to learn from each other. So these good practices can flow very quickly from one place to another. And three, we are very fast in coming up with notes that are best practice, good practice notes, and I'm sure you have seen some of those coming in this crisis. I am extremely proud with the staff of the IMF that in this crisis really stepped up. We have funded 102 billion. We were, Sri Mulyani knows that she was on the board of the IMF. Not very often when we would do so much so fast, but we also have integrated, 83 countries have received support, but we also have integrated accountability. So money goes where it must and we can trace it.
Thanks so much. I hope many countries are listening to this. So you have said the tracking and monitoring is very important. Open access to data. I think many countries need to listen to this. We definitely need open access to data. And of course, what the IMF has been doing when they do give out their financial packages. So excellent. The next, I would go to Ms. Indravati. How is your government in prioritizing accountability in the COVID response?
Thank you very much, Bina, for this conversation. This is one of the most important topic that as a finance ministers, when you talk about accountability, transparency, and credibility, this is really the real currency of the treasurer or Minister of Finance important reputation. So for me and for the Ministry of Finance, accountability is the highest priority. And we are dealing with the situation of this COVID, which is extraordinary. It's not a normal time, it's not a normal budget. And this is also happened as a shock, which is coming without any preparation. So this is really a challenge, even if you have the intention to be accountable, when you are dealing with this extraordinary situation, you really have to think extraordinary too. First, in the normal situation, the budget usually constructed in a very process which is very open, involving the parliament, consulting, bottom-up process with the civil society to get what we need, what is the development goal, and then you construct and design the budget. And when it is approved, then it's become a law, then you publish it. You publish, and then you know how much you are going to spend for what, where, and so on. Now, during this COVID, you suddenly have a huge challenge. People cannot move, mobility is just totally stopped, and the economy contracting very deep. So the revenue on your revenue side, whether this is tax or non-tax revenue, is definitely going to drop. And then on the other hand, the expenditure, the spending side increased dramatically. You have to deal with the health spending. You have to protect the people, that is the social safety net increase. You have to support the small, medium enterprises. You have to even also support the big businesses because they are all threatened by this COVID. The economy paralyzed. So how you are going to put this accountability within the design of your budget that suddenly have to be changed? It's been changed because of this COVID, and the change of this necessary action that need to be done by the government. So in Indonesian case, first the government, president, submitting emergency law because this is an emergency situation. And the law explaining very explicitly what is the state finance, especially budget, is going to do to deal with this situation, emergency situation. Then from this law, we derive what we call it the posture detail of the new budget. So we revise the budget. Maybe I'm fortunate in this case because the parliament in Indonesia is very supportive to government. So I communicate and consulted with them, but there is no really like a very difficult session because they recognize that we really need to do the action which is quickly and effectively. And that's why our budget suddenly have to change from the deficit of 1.7% of GDP to become 6.3% of GDP. Within only 2 months. And people want to know why suddenly you increase the deficit in such a huge amount. So we have to explain. So part of it is because the revenue dropped, part of it is because of the expenditure increase. Even within the expenditure, there is also still uncertainty because you really don't know what is going to be the COVID is going to affect people. So what you try to do when you try to establish accountability is first by doing very transparent, very transparent. What you're trying to do, why you're doing it, and why the design of the budget is such and such. This transparency is also included a very detail on what is the program related to this COVID. If you are going to spend almost like 1% of your GDP for the health related spending related to this COVID, what is the item on that? How much is going to be for upgrading hospital? How much is going to improve and protecting the health care people? How much you are going to spend for compensating for the patient because of the COVID, and also for how much you are going to pay for the testing and all other on related to the health. On a social safety net, which we increased 3 times, so 300% increase, you really have to explain who is going to be protected from this new additional significant budget. What is the original target? Why you expand it? Do you have name by address, by account number? Or why in this case in a certain target area, if they are not ready yet, you really have to inventorize. So a lot of things, and Indonesia is maybe not like in many other advanced countries, which all the system in place. We sometimes have to deal with the imperfection. Data is not complete. System sometimes also is not totally ready. When you upsize the social safety net, there is always a downside risk. Inclusion error, exclusion error. But as long as you are very open and transparent, then you still can maintain this, what you call it, credibility and trust of the people. But even with that, we also know that there is always, in the emergency situation, people who try to get the benefit out of it, moral hazard or even corruption. So you really have to be very forceful and forthcoming about what is the potential of this moral hazard. In our case, we talk with the internal auditor, so they are auditing even in this case the design, and then we also work with the law enforcement. Especially, they know exactly the design of the budget, so they know where the potential weaknesses that can be exploited. You know what happened in Indonesia? We have one minister which is caught by the corruption case. And that is because we are very open about what is the design. And within that kind of situation, we still want to maintain the trust of the people by saying that, okay, we recognize these weaknesses and this is what we try to address this issue. So what I'm saying is, this is a totally, what you call it, extraordinary situation. That you have to move very quick. There is an emergency situation that you have to respond. But it doesn't mean when you are in an emergency situation that you are not consulting, you are not transparent, and you are not accountable. You can and you should be very quick in responding it, because my president is always said, we are in crisis. Everything should be speed up. It doesn't mean that you compromise on the integrity, but definitely speed is very important in this case. So I think that's what I'm trying to share with you, that accountability and transparency is one of the packets that cannot be separated with the policy response of the government, in this case, the budget response, which has become one of the most important instruments in responding to this COVID situation. And for us to be able to maintain this credibility and trust, you really have to be very prepared to be open and get a lot of feedback from the public. I think overall, when we know that in the next couple of years, you start to consolidate your budget, this kind of trust is very important. Because then people knows when I have to collect tax again, in order for me to be able to consolidate budget, they know that, well, you cannot spend like this forever. You know that the budget need to be then continue or need to be restored their sustainability. And that's why you are not only responding this year, but you are thinking like 2-3 years ahead from now, in which you will do the unpopular thing. Kristalina knows very well. Consolidation of the budget is not a popular thing, meaning that you have to collect revenue more or you have to spend less, or both combination, which is both is not really popular for the public. So in order for us to be able to get still the continued public support when you need to do what you need to do, that is, as a finance minister, you have to make sure your budget stay healthy, then you really have to maintain this credibility and trust and confidence of the people. And that's why accountability is at the highest and the top priority. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Indravati. I think it's really important that we need to think extraordinary because the situation is so extraordinary. But I really like the innovative emergency law that you brought out, and including the whole transparency aspect. I think that's excellent, and I hope other countries can replicate that, as what Ms. Georgieva was saying earlier, as a good practice, if we can adopt that. I'd now like to go to Mr. Dodaro. What can auditors do with these receipts that will enhance accountability in a way that truly benefits those most affected by the COVID pandemic? We can't hear you. You probably have to unmute, please.
Yes, sorry. Well, first, good day, everyone. Very pleased to be invited to participate in today's discussion. I want to thank the International Budget Partnership and the Finance Ministry of Indonesia for being invited, and to our host and other panelists for their focus on equity and transparency during this global pandemic. With regard to auditors, there's a very important role for independent oversight during this emergency situation, given what has been said about the enormous amount of money that our governments are putting forward and the need to spend that funding in a very efficient and quick manner, but also targeted to where it's going to achieve its objectives and have the highest and best use of that money. Within the United States, we are now auditing what is the largest rescue package in American history. Over $2.6 trillion have already been appropriated starting last March. And as we speak, our Congress and our administration are negotiating another relief package that'll be hundreds of billions of dollars more to this effort. At GAO, we're doing what we call real-time auditing. This is auditing while this money is being spent, not after the fact. And so we are issuing bi-monthly reports, as Kristalina mentioned, to the public. So the public knows how much money's been appropriated, what it's been used for, and how people are being held accountable for that use. And we give monthly briefings to congressional committees so that they understand these issues. We're focused on what impact is this having on public health goals that we've set, as well as the economy. Both are very important, as been noted already. Now, in the public health area, we focused in our first 4 reports that we've already issued to the public. We've made over 30 recommendations to the executive branch agencies and to our Congress for mid-course corrections and to increase more transparency and accountability over the funds. In the health arena, for example, a lot of money has gone to the medical supply chain, buying personal protective equipment, for example. And we found that a lot of progress has been made in that area, but there are still gaps in this medical supply chain. And we recommended that the executive branch develop a plan to focus on those gaps for the remainder of the pandemic, both in terms of personal protective equipment, testing supplies, supplies needed to administer the vaccines. With regard to the vaccines, we've recommended that our government have a comprehensive distribution plan and that there's clear communication to the public so people understand that area. And when our health agencies are issuing emergency use authorizations, which means it's not a formal approval, but they're giving special approval given the circumstances, that they have full transparency on the scientific underpinnings of their decisions, so people have confidence in the vaccines and the therapies that they're going to address the issue. So those are another set of recommendations. And with regard to testing, for example, we've noted there's not complete and consistent information on testing to monitor the pandemic, to target additional needs, and that the guidance that's given to the public isn't always clear and consistent. This has been true both in terms of when you need to be tested and what type of tests you need to take, as well as what kind of guidance in reopening our schools and the need for that to be consistent and clear. Now, on the economic side, we focus both on aid the government's been giving individuals as well as to businesses and other sectors of our economy. Just to give you a couple examples, on the individual side, there were payments initially made to people making under a certain income threshold to help them get through this situation, particularly since a lot of people had lost their employment. And the payments were based upon their prior year tax returns. Now, as a result, you had a number of over $1 billion go to be issued on behalf of deceased individuals. And so we recommend that the government say, you have to get that money back so it can be used to help other people. And so far they've recovered, $700 million, and we expect that to increase, so that can be targeted to people. Now, on the other side, because a number of people didn't make enough money to file tax returns, 9 million Americans didn't receive the check that should have received the check, and they're probably in the situation of needing the most help. And so we recommended that our government move more quickly to identify those people, and we gave them suggestions on how to do that so that they could get the assistance that they're due to help them during this emergency. And all this goes to building public trust in the government to help people when they need help. With regard to businesses, over half a trillion dollars went to small businesses because they were affected and didn't have the same financing options that big businesses had. Although we had some help to our big businesses in the aviation sector and others. But what we found was the money was spent very quickly to help them, but there was very little attention paid to transparency and accountability issues, so that they needed an oversight plan because of already existing fraud cases that have been noted to better track that money and better report. So we've made a lot of assistance to them. But this is happening real time. This is where auditors can adjust their practices and be a part of the solution as this event unfolds. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share our experiences with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodaro. And I think, yes, auditors can be part of the solution. I really like the fact that how every step of the way you inform the public as to what was happening, and therefore increasing the accountability and transparency. So great work there. We go to the next question. The role of governments in channeling public resources toward relief efforts will determine how many lives are saved and how many people fall into poverty as a result of COVID-19. Choices regarding the formulation and implementation of relief expenditures are too important to be made opaquely and without any public input, especially when inequality and perceived corruption have already undermined public trust with many governments. My question to all the four panelists: now that emergency responses have been largely put in place across the world, what role can civil society organizations play, and what can governments do to facilitate civic engagement alongside the legislative branch in the formulation. So we can go in any order. Maybe we can start with Kristalina Deva and then move on to Ms. Indravati Warren, and then I go to Mr. Dudar.
What a good question to concentrate on. In a crisis like no other, we need everybody to step in. Civil society organizations, especially those that are grassroots, have such an enormous role to play. First, by making sure that people are well informed of the problems that they face and the solutions they can rely on, but especially on where they can seek help. Sri Mulyani talked about social safety nets. If people don't know what they are, they're not going to tap into resources that may be vital for saving their livelihoods and even more saving their lives. Secondly, to make sure that money is well used. When we are coming with big packages to be deployed very rapidly, there are risks of error of judgment when maybe not the best way of use of money is being designed. And that feedback civil society organizations provide us a public good. And of course, to make sure that money is not abused, that there is no corruption. And I can tell you that I have seen in this crisis so many excellent examples on all three areas, on making sure that people know where help is, in making sure that it is well designed and efficient, and also that there is no abuse of money. And in that regard, a key Observatorio Fiscal of Chile. They analyze controversial procurement procedures in fast action so that the problem can be fixed. And the parliamentary watch of Uganda that did a very thorough, in-depth analysis of allocation. These are the ways in which civil society organizations can make a huge difference in the efficiency of funds and also in giving more credibility to the actions that are taking. Sri Mulyani talked so well about the importance of public trust in the measures that governments take. And it can only be enhanced when there is this civil society oversight. I want to tell you a story actually here on the very best lesson I learned in my professional life about the role of engaging people. So they are the best controller. No disrespect to auditing agencies intended. And it was in Sri Mulyani's country, in Indonesia, in the late 90s. I was at that time with the World Bank. I was in charge of environment and social development. And we needed to help Indonesia very quickly in the midst of this Asia crisis to get help to communities. And what we invented was the so-called Kecamatan development project. I'm sure it resonates with Sri Mulyani. In this project, instead of having sophisticated supervision, the one thing we did was to demand in each village, each community, Kecamatan, that is a recipient of grants, in the middle of the village to put a whiteboard and write on the whiteboard what the money is for and who is responsible. Just giving this clear information to people created the most effective supervision of the women. So schools are being built and clinics are there for the health of their families. supervision that the roads are really built on time and within budget, done by people. And that actually gave me, this experience gave me this very strong belief that above all, civil society organizations are to be windows to information for people and empower people so they can be the controllers of how public money is being spent. And at the IMF, we take very seriously what you do, the index that you create as an information source, but above all, that governments integrate in the emergency response plans very clear role for civil society organizations, and as much openness to people for what they do, how they do it, and how they account for what is being done. So all the power to you to do your job, to be the light that is thrown over everything that is being done, and the confidence provider for actions of the governments. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Georgieva. Before I go to Ms. Indravati, I would like to ask Warren to come in and quickly give his thoughts and suggestions. Warren?
Yes, thank you, Bina. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us. IBP starts from the position that citizens have a right to monitor and influence the use of public resources through the budget. It's after all their money, as some of the other panelists have said. But in 20 years of work in this field, we've also seen that bringing citizens into the budget process leads to greater equity, to efficiency and effectiveness. It's quite simple. When citizens have a say, governments end up making better decisions on how money is raised, where it's spent, and who it's spent on, as well as how well it's spent. We see this value proposition every day in the work of our partners around the world, especially in response to COVID-19. So to give a couple of examples, in South Africa, the Asifikalani campaign works with informal settlement residents in over 200 settlements to track whether the government is providing social services to keep people safe across the country. Residents track whether the government is ensuring access to clean water, cleaning public toilets, and maintaining sewage systems. The results are published regularly in a scorecard and used to engage the government, national and local governments, to adapt the government's response based on what the data is showing. To date, more than 600 residents now have better access to water and sanitation as a result, and the initiative is in the process of scaling. In Senegal, the Federation for People with Disabilities responded to a critical gap in the new social grant by tracking individuals with disabilities that were being left out of the program and advocated for their inclusion. As a result, now more than 100,000 people with disabilities receive for the first time assistance for food and utilities. The government clearly saw the value in this proposition, or in this collaboration, because they called for a full review of the Social Guidance Act and invited a Federation member to sit on the formal committee overseeing the COVID-19 resilience program. Those are to do with tracking, but often civil society also has to intervene to make sure that government is spending enough. And in Nigeria, the small-scale women's farmers organization called SWAFON made sure that food security was prioritized in pandemic relief. Their advocacy helped to prevent a massive planned cut in the agricultural budget, contributed to new lines benefiting women farmers, and a special fund to write off interest on agricultural loans. The impact of civic engagement in budgets, however, goes beyond benefiting citizens and civil society. Civic groups also rely on and help to build the capability of formal oversight institutions, such as supreme audit institutions and legislatures. And in this way, they help reinforce the connections between accountability actors, strengthening the oversight system. In Ghana, when the independence of the National Audit Institution was recently threatened, it was a civic group that went to court to demand the reinstatement of the head of the audit office. In Sierra Leone, in Jamaica, in Argentina, and Zambia, to mention a couple, civil society organizations help raise awareness of SAI findings and help create pressure on government to respond. In other countries, such as the Philippines and Indonesia and India, civic actors work with supreme audit institutions to identify audit sites and conduct audits in parallel or jointly with SAIs. More work like this needs to be done. And you can read these and many other inspiring stories on our website, internationalbudget.org. But just to conclude here, the general point is we know that public information is critical for accountability. But as important is making spaces, formal and informal, to include citizens in the budget process. When public information meets public engagement, that's when you see the results. That's when you see more equitable and efficient policies and outcomes, stronger oversight systems, and ultimately a robust dialogue between government and citizens, building the trust that underpins resilient democracy.
Well, civic engagement is very important, as mentioned by Kristalina as well as Warren. So what I'm going to addressing in this question is more not whether you need it in order to improve the quality, that is equity, efficiency, and effectiveness of your public spending. But most importantly is the engagement is actually also evolve. Kristalina mentioned about Kecamatan Development Program. That was like back in 1990. At that time, we are not having what you call it, information technology and digital platform as today. So at that time, maybe the engagement of the civil society is through all those meetings in which they are going to then share what is going to be the allocated of the funding in each of the society, and then they are going to discuss and then decide how they are going to use. And then they are also at the same time then look and supervise or monitor the accountability of the use of those funding. So that kind of situation. With the digital and information technology, I think the engagement is becoming very dynamic. I will give you many of the examples that we are doing. First, as Jean mentioned earlier, that this COVID is an extraordinary. So for us, we are not really very specific and is final in terms of the design of our policy response. So in this case, the audit, like Jean mentioned about real-time audit and midterm or mid-course correction is very important. As long as in your system you are allowing for that, and how this correction can be done through what kind of feedback. This feedback is coming from the civil society, as Warren mentioned earlier. Now, for Indonesia, what I'm trying to do in order to combine the now digital technology, which is much more advanced, and the feedback can be much more direct, instant, and really quick, then you really design the way you are communicating your policy as well as the transparency of your budget. First, of course, you put it in a website. That is the minimum requirement. But even within this budget, it is not going to be like accessible if you are not able to download your budget in your mobile phone. Because now people really like using their mobile, and that's why Ministry of Finance now developing the application so that you are going to be able to download all the necessary information through your mobile phone. I think that's very important. Second one, you are not just uploading the fact and the figure in your website. You try to reaching out by engaging civil society in a non-traditional, non-conventional way. First, for example, using social media. Twitter is one thing, but we also have to use the Instagram, Facebook, Twitter in order for us to be able to tell the public what we are trying to do. Of course, there is a limitation of the space, and that's why the creativity of our team, in order for us to be able to present this so that the civil society can engage, is very important. You know, my own Instagram, people will usually say, why I'm not receiving this government? I feel that I am eligible, I'm qualified, but I'm not getting it. That is really an instant. I continuously, almost every day, when I look at my social media, when I see some of the response telling about a feedback, I usually directly then responded to my team. There is a complaint about tax, there is complaint about the budget, there is complaint about the target, there is complaint about correctness or incorrectness of the amount that they are getting. So it's really now with the information technology and digital technology, we really can get a very quick direct response. I usually use the word to my team that we like every day have a body contact with all the society. So you don't have the luxury of the back. And then I also then developing in a much more creative way. I'm actually reaching out not on the civil society, those adults, but I even go to the very like primary school or junior primary, junior high, in which I have the like Olympiad, Olympic, the budget Olympic, for them to understand the budget, you know. So I have this budget Olympic for the junior high, for the senior high, up to the college student. You know, in the past 2-3 years, the participation for those who want to compete to understand the budget, from originally the participation around 300, now 3,000 high school in Indonesia want to participate. And they really like understand the budget amazingly. I don't think that when I was in high school, I have those kind of understanding about our budget, you know. This time is just amazing. Then for the junior high, I even have this kind of competition in the form of vlog. That means they have to find the government project in which they can explain how much the money will be spent, who's benefiting from that. And so amazing, and all this, the young generation, the millennial generation, that they are expressing and indirectly actually reporting to us that this project is really executed or not. So I think the civic engagement is very critical. But with the technology now, I think no question about those important to facilitate the civic engagement. But with the technology, you really have to be very creative with the changing of the technology. Then the type of engagement needs also to be adjusted. And I think this is also at the same time creating, as I said, accountability as well as credibility and trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Indravati. We're actually running out of time, so I'll just quickly go to the third question so that we can quickly take a minute each, and then we will open the floor because there are questions coming from the audiences as well. So countries have responded to the COVID crisis by investing trillions of dollars in relief and recovery efforts. Much more will be needed in the coming years in order to alleviate the long-term consequences of the COVID-19. So how are we going to confront mounting debts, reduce revenues, enhance fiscal risks, and increased fiscal constraints? I'll first go with Ms. Gergieva, and then I'll request Warren to also tell us what is it that institutions like the IMF can do in this regard. So, Ms. Georgieva, 1 minute, and then we go to the next panelist. Thank you.
Well, what we know from experience from previous pandemics is a pandemic leads to increase in inequality. This happened after H1N1, it happened after SARS, and the risk of this happening again is really high. We talk about different letters to shape the recovery. One letter I'm particularly worried about is K-shaped recovery. Part of the economy, part of society doing really well, the digital economy, the high-tech sector doing really well, and another part, low-skilled workers, women, young people doing very badly, falling behind. So we have to face this, and I at the IMF, we are placing this front and center to make sure that we do not see increase in inequality within countries and actually across countries as well. And within countries, what we are focusing on are three components. One, fiscal policy. Sri Mulyani talked about it. We need to see taxation for the 21st century in place, recognizing who are the winners of this crisis and how they can help the rest of society. And then making sure that there may be some progressivity in taxation that is still possible without damaging growth. And our research shows there is possibility to do some of it. And then, of course, collect taxes to make sure that money spending goes to provide access to opportunities, that we invest in people, that we prioritize education, health, social protection. Resilient people means future shocks are not going to be so painful. And three, make the economy as dynamic as possible, right on the digital revolution, to eliminate the red tape that sometimes is on the way of businesses, especially women-led businesses, empower young people to step forward and make sure that businesses flourish, SMEs flourish, there are chances for everybody to do better. But it is not going to fall from the sky. If we do nothing, letter K would hit us. So policymakers, institutions like mine, huge role in the next months to shape up what would be a fairer world on the other side of this crisis.
Thank you, Ms. Georgieva. To Warren, what can countries actually do to advance the open budget agenda? What do you think actors like IMF can do to encourage and support moves in that direction?
Thank you, Bina. And I'll try and say something both of what countries can do and perhaps some ideas about what the IMF can do. Every year, as some of you know, the IBP publishes the Open Budget Survey, a regular comparative index of open budgeting around the world. Over the last 15 years, what we've been able to see is that governments have increasingly, relatively consistently, been increasing the amount of information made available to the public on budget decisions and budget processes. The gains or the pace of increase has been much too slow, though, if we really want to yield the benefit from this increased information in time to benefit the COVID-19 response, let alone the 2030 agenda. But the real problem that shines out from the Open Budget Survey consistently is the gaps in government spaces for citizen engagement in the budget process. At the moment, in the last Open Budget Survey, which most countries scored somewhere around the average of 14 out of 100 for citizen engagement. Basically, and unfortunately, and most countries around the world do not provide space for citizens to engage in the budget process. This echoes, I think, research that's come out from many institutions, including Civicus, amongst others, showing that civil society is under threat at the moment. Spaces for civil society organizations are being constrained. Activists and journalists are really under threat. There's a crisis of civic space. But what the OBS also shows is there's a broader crisis of accountability and oversight in budget systems around the world. Legislatures and supreme audit institutions in too many countries do not have the independence or the resources to properly carry out their job, despite their best intentions. And so, together with 120 other international and national civil society organizations, IBP launched earlier this year an urgent call to action. A call to action directed at governments that focus on 4 ambitious but achievable goals over the next 5 years. 1, publish timely information on how resources are raised, allocated, and spent, especially on execution. 2, create real participation opportunities for all people, particularly those from communities that are marginalized. 3, strengthen independent institutions, legislatures and supreme audit institutions, amongst others, that monitor and oversee spending of public money. And 4, let's make sure that countries do not backslide on their performance. You know, I think as we all know, there's something like $12 trillion set aside for pandemic relief at the moment, the greatest relief effort of our time. To ensure this investment is maximized, we have to combine it, complement it at a fraction of the cost with a parallel effort to open budgets and expand civic engagement. That's the way to build back better. Ben, if I can just take 1 minute more, I really wanted to hope that we can start a discussion with the IMF, who've been great champions of fiscal transparency in the past, about how we can advance the agenda on open budgets further, and particularly the agenda on citizen engagement. The IMF played such a powerful role in helping to champion access to information, and specifically budget and fiscal transparency. I think it would be wonderful if the fund and similar institutions could step in to play a similarly powerful role promoting civic engagement in budget processes. 4 ideas. The one is, Kristalina, could you use your profile on the IMF platforms, including space in board discussions, to open space for a discussion on the importance of civic engagement in good peer practice? Opening those spaces would create an incredibly powerful signal about the role of citizens in budget processes. 2, we're really concerned about the lack of funding for supreme audit institutions and legislatures relative to the executive. We must keep executives properly funded, but parallel to that, we need to give equal priority to oversight actors. 3, Article 4 consultations and reports are powerful signals to governments about good practices. Can we look to incorporating fiscal openness, fiscal transparency, and civic engagement in those reports? And finally, can we look to including civic actors and parliaments in training offered by IMF hubs, enriching the quality of training for everybody? Thank you.
I was just wondering if Ms. Georgieva would quickly like to respond, or should we just open the floor?
I was hoping you would give me a chance to respond. Thank you. Look, these are great ideas for us to lift up the role of citizens' participation, especially now that we have a powerful friend, and it is digital. Indonesia leads the way in using digital platforms. We have seen it. Nigeria has an app, I Follow the Money. We have to, at the IMF, embrace this new digital world and see how we can systematically press for more participation, for more openness. So I actually wrote down your 4 recommendations, and we will discuss it after this with our team. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from somebody from India. Malini Chakra is asking the question. The Indian government COVID response has very little for the poor in general, and even less for poor women. Given your commitment to gender issues, what would you recommend India and other governments to do to address this disproportionate impact? And that was actually my last question, that we have seen across the world, heads of governments in Denmark, Ethiopia, Finland, Germany, Iceland, New Zealand, and Slovakia being led by powerful women who have found effective solutions to the immediate health crisis and communicating transparently and compassionately. So probably we can sort of bring in the question from India, and also that women are leading this in the world today. What are your quick thoughts on that? Especially to Ms. Georgieva and Ms. Indravan.
I suggest that Sri Mulyani goes first. She is a role model and a rare case of woman finance minister. It looks like there will be more women finance ministers, Sri Mulyani, so there will be more of us around various tables. But let's let Sri Mulyani speak first, and I will follow.
I think first we look at the COVID. Thank you, Kristalina. I agree with you that we really need to increase the number of the women finance minister, so that when you are convening in IMF, you are going to have to see more women in the table. But when you talk about COVID-19, this is really affecting women more than men. Why? Because health is 70% the worker in the health is woman. So there is a disproportional because of this feminine sector of the health, which is affecting women. In fact, actually, in the next couple of days in Indonesia, we are going to have to celebrate what we call it Mother's Day, but it's not really Mother's Day. This is the day in which we are going to celebrate back in 1928, when the first woman organizing their movement in order for them to be able to support the independence of Indonesia. So it's a very historical for Indonesia. And that's why we are talking about how this woman in playing the role, especially in economy, in politics, as well as in many other areas. Now, talking about COVID, we really see that this impact to the woman, it's much more because of the nature of this health threatening the family as well as the health worker. Second, when many family forced to do the work from home and school from home, this is one of the feedback in my ministry. I have 84,000 people working as finance ministers. There are many of the young couples, of course, young family in the Ministry of Finance. That this woman, the mother, usually have the burden which is much more. Not only that this COVID putting them and force them to be stay at home, and so they have to work from home. At the same time, their children have to school from home, and this children which is never actually have a school from home, they need to have somebody to coach them. So the parent, especially again the woman, have this kind of burden which is much more than their counterpart, that is the man. This is maybe happen also in many other countries, I'm sure. So that's why I'm instructing my team now. If you are going to make a meeting, don't do it during school time. So there is no office hour, because you are doing work from home. That means there is no office hour. So you can do it after school time, so that young parent, especially the woman, don't have to choose between that. They have to be in a work from home and zooming with their office in a meeting, or they have to then taking care of their children, which is struggling to do the school from home. Now, responding to this, and that's why when you design this kind of COVID response, you really have to put this gender equality, or in this case, within the perspective or design of your policy. The social safety net that we are increasing 3 times, mainly supporting poor family, the bottom 40%, and they have to be received by the woman head of household, because they're the one who then will spend. They will spend mostly for the education. I also, in this case, responding to the previous question about the civic engagement, we actually done a lot of survey in order for us to understand whether all the policy that we are implemented is the right targeted. And on the first survey, which is back in April, at that time there is 40% of the error. It's really high. We did it another 2 months after that, and we are working also with the World Bank and other academic, that is local universities. So they are providing us with the feedback. With this kind of survey, then we can make a prompt correction. This is like what Jean mentioned about mid-course correction. Then this kind of mistargeted within only in the next 2 months can be reduced into below 20. So more than 50% reduction. And now it's getting even lower. So I'm saying that when you design it right, you still need to design the policy which the response can be, or the feedback can be received immediately or timely, so that you are going to be able to respond. Last, my statement is that I think this COVID creating many people, whether you are losing job or reduction of your working hours, and that's why your income is going to be also a decline. In Indonesia, all our social safety net has been able to prevent the poverty, which is before crisis, before COVID, is 9.2%. If we are not doing this social protection, it can increase into close to 11%. Because of this COVID, because of the social safety net, we can prevent the increasing poverty at the very minimal level. So this is also because you also put in place this feedback and making sure that you are going to also correct the design of your policy. So what I'm saying, maybe when you talk about women leaders, maybe they are more sensitive and understanding that naturally you understand how the household is going to be under a huge pressure. Then when you design the policy, I think the women leaders tend to be more sensitive. The way that they are thinking and design the policy have the element of empathy and understanding the very detailed, critical, or maybe inequality in many society, and that need to be addressed through the policy that will correct those inequality. So I'm also supporting, as well as supporting this observation that having the women leaders will provide you with a bigger opportunity to have a design which is more empathy and more sensitive to the need of society. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Georgieva, any?
I would add 3 things. One, great saying from Eleanor Roosevelt: women are like tea bags. We don't know how strong we are until you put us in hot water. In this crisis, in hot water, women prove to be strong. 2, I have a simple suggestion to the International Budget Partnership. So you gave recommendation to the fund, and I would reciprocate. We have learned a lot about gender-based budgeting. The fund has provided recommendations in this regard to 130 countries. And it is time for us to take stock systematically. What have we learned in gender-based budgeting that must be integrated, and then advocate for it? And my second recommendation to all of us is to recognize the book on the economics on gender equality. This book is written. We know when women participate, everybody benefits. Companies do better, countries do better. How can we move more women into leadership positions? That is really a job for each and every one of us. In our organization, in the IMF, in the last year, we have increased the share of women in senior leadership positions from 35 to 45%. Obviously, equality means 50-50, so we have still some work to do. In civil society organizations, interestingly enough, 70% of the staff are women, 70% of the leadership are men. So we all have to recognize that we have to encourage women, support women, and eliminate obstacles to women so they can do what is good for everyone, for their families and for society. And remember, women sometimes need a little bit of encouragement to step up. In my own life, every single job up, I would be questioning, oh, maybe there is somebody better. Why not so and so? We have to recognize that mentoring women, supporting women, Sri Mulyani, you and I being united front, that is absolutely, and actually Bina and you as well, and the men to step up for us for your own betterment. So that is my view. We have to all have a role to play. He for she and she for she. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Georgieva. We're running out of time, but I would request all of you to give your final thoughts in half a minute. So I would give Mr. Dodaro the first, and then we go then to Warren and Sri Indravati, and then to Ms. Georgieva. So we will start with Mr. Dodaro.
Well, I think the issues we talked about today were extremely valuable. I think the key takeaways are the government needs to be flexible and nimble and to be sensitive to the needs, particularly of the most vulnerable populations. Everyone's affected by this COVID-19, but those that are most vulnerable are affected even disproportionately more. Civil societies have a great role to play in this particular regard. I make sure every one of the hundreds of audits in GAO every year, where it's appropriate, that we engage civil society organizations in helping us understand what the issues are from those individuals. So we get the government's perspective, but we get the individuals who are supposed to be helped, their perspective as well. So I thank you again for the opportunity to participate today. I enjoyed all the discussion, and for Kristalina and Sir Melania, 58% of the people at GAO are women. I've appointed the first chief operating officer woman and general counsel in GAO's history. So I'm on the case. So, and I understand
that explains the performance of GAO, Gene.
Performance has gone up.
Thank you. Warren.
Thank you, Bina. I think we need to work really hard to close two gaps at least. The first gap is the gap between our knowledge of how powerful open budgeting and citizen engagement is in public finance and the experience and practices on the ground. We have to close that gap. The second gap we need to close is that there are approximately 38 finance ministers out of 194 countries that are women. Only 38 out of 194. That's a gap that needs to be really urgently addressed. And I think the two gaps work together.
Excellent. Ms. Georgieva?
We know that the pandemic actually made us reevaluate what matters in life. Our health, our families, our friends, the ability to hug them matters. And that soberness is something we need to build on. In my heart of heart, I believe that the best memorial we can build for the people who died in the pandemic, for the loss of well-being, for the loss of jobs, the best memorial is, on the other side, to come up with a more inclusive, fairer world in which every voice counts. And we all can contribute to make that happen, to build this memorial.
Thank you. And Ms. Idravati, please.
Well, first I would like to thank all the panelists today working together with International Budget Partnership to have this great conversation. It's a very timely, it's a very relevant, it's a very high priority, because we know that it is an extraordinary situation. It's not coming once in a lifetime. It could be like 1 century ago. So this is really a very historical, and we should not waste this crisis. That is exactly with this kind of crisis, we actually can see the opportunity for us to establish a better system. As Warren mentioned, there is still a huge gap. Maybe in my case in Indonesia, we've already like evolving from non-transparent budget in the past to become a very open, democratic and transparent budget, both in terms of the process, political process with legislators, as well as on the post-audit with our independent auditors. And they are all published, they are all actually mentioned to the public what is the inadequacy, inappropriateness, or any the way we conduct the budget. So for Indonesia, we are fortunate that we used the crisis back in 97, 98, when we have the financial crisis, to then use those crises to establish a new process of budgeting, which is becoming participative, open, and transparent. Now we are facing with this COVID crisis. So let us use this crisis, don't wasting it. We can learn from each other, and the role of the IMF, Kristalina, thank you so much with your leadership. It's always great that you are promoting a totally different approach of how the IMF is actually engaged with many of the member countries. I think that's really something which is really needed, because the institution like the IMF, multilateral, we really need it. At the end, all countries are connected and need each other. And with this global situation, we even need even more to work together. So I would like to thank all of us, all of you who participate in this panel, and of course for all of us to be able to put the idea and then to implement a better reform and use this momentum of COVID to get a better governance, as well as the result of our budget that will help especially the poor and the vulnerable. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Indravati. It was an absolute pleasure for me to moderate this panel. We had the finance minister of one of the largest democracies, Ms. Indravati. We had the managing director, Ms. Gergieva of the International Monetary Fund. We had Mr. Dodaro of the Supreme Audit Institution of US, and Mr. Warren Krafchick. The International Budget Partnership and Warren has posed some challenges for us, and I think we should be ready to take those challenges to the next level, hoping that the next time we have these conversations, we'll have more women who are finance ministers and more women in leadership positions. And I'm hoping that there will be more collaboration and partnership with different stakeholders globally. Wish you all the best, stay safe, and have a good evening and have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Thank you.